So this is a photograph of the old Kai Tak airport in Hong Kong. I photographed this in 2018, and this is one of my favourite images from the Fantasy City by the Harbour series. And I want to talk a little bit about where this image was taken, how I ended up here, what it means to me, and how I achieved this treatment to the image. So on this particular night, I had spent some time during the afternoon and during the day in Kowloon, around Tu Kwa Wan, and some of the apartment buildings around that area. I had wandered around with some friends. We explored different parts of Kowloon near the ocean. Went through exploring some different buildings, and really I got a great exposure to that aspect of Hong Kong. Again, I had only been there for a little bit at that point. I'd only been there for about 2 days, so it was still all very fresh and new to me. But after that, we sort of went our own ways, and we were in a group of 4 originally, and we split off, and I went just with one other friend as the sun began to set, and we set off on this mission sort of northeast, further around Kowloon Bay, and thinking back, I can't quite remember how long we walked, but it was a huge trek. I think we might have even gotten as far as Jordan Valley, but definitely around to Kowloon Bay, and kind of that more of a business district area, and we just sort of let ourselves get guided and followed our noses in a way through that part of the city, and that was very interesting. And on the way back, we followed the highway, and I remember just crossing over overpasses and things like that, and we followed the highway, and we actually, I noticed a clover leaf where you could come off the highway, and we ducked down through that, and it was quite overgrown. I remember there was kind of like the chain link fences and things, and I noticed a hole in the fence, and we actually were able to get through that and out onto the vast kind of former Kai Tak airport area, and that was very interesting because everything else around it was fully built up, under construction. There was high rises everywhere, and then this one particular area amongst the city was dark, almost as dark as the ocean. But unlike the ocean, it didn't reflect any light, so it was almost darker in that way. And we sort of wandered around, and there was, at that stage, the construction was still more around the earthworks. The airport had been closed for sort of 25 years, something like that. But they were still, I think, in the process of doing a lot of the foundational work. And so that was taking place, but at this point it was nighttime, so it was very quiet. Though there were sort of patrols and people in the construction site itself. But we managed to make our way across that stretch of land to where it met the ocean. And we camped out on the rocks where one of the old runways were, or it would have been either a runway, or perhaps it was just the one of the staging areas for the airplanes. But it was definitely one of the areas of the airport. And anyway, we sat there and just sort of got our bearings a little bit, and I was very fascinated by just this sort of contrast as I took this photograph of the foreground. Well, there's not really a foreground, I guess. It's, we've got this ocean that kind of takes that foreground aspect of it, and so everything is midground or background. And so the first thing we see is this sky contrasted with this dark ribbon of ocean, and then you've got these concrete structures, kind of anonymous kind of quite a miscellaneous structure. What is it? Kind of overgrown, a little bit of graffiti on it, a little bit dark, under construction, broken. And that's contrasted with the lights of the buildings behind. And the sky has opened right up. It's not the claustrophobic Hong Kong that we're familiar with, but very much this open sky. And I was really interested in how that plays in with the idea of the city itself. Kai Tak closed. I think it was 1998 was when the last flight took off or landed from Kai Tak Airport. But kind of what does that mean for Hong Kong? There's this location, this place that kind of represents a transition. Airports are by definition liminal spaces where people come and go. No one lives at an airport. No one can really belong there. And so the last remnants of that, in the form of this building we see in the photograph here, which is the last building standing from Kai Tak. Everything else was gone. And as of today, I believe this building has also been demolished. This is sort of the last vestige of that. And so this connection to a place that you can go to, or a place that you cannot return to, I should say. This airport represents this old Hong Kong, this old image of the city which I grew up with, which was a city of commerce where everything is happening. It was a vibrant, dynamic place, a place where doing business, making stuff happen was more important than any cultural or political differences. And for me, that was always quite an alluring thing. There's a lot of Hong Kong, I guess a lot of connections between Hong Kong and even New Zealand. People come and go. There was this kind of visual connection, architecturally, colonial architecture, kind of similar ideas. And so there are buildings and other parts of Hong Kong where you could kind of squint your eyes and see you could see Queen Street of Auckland, or somewhere in Melbourne or Sydney, and you could see sort of the tracing of that architecture and that idea in the buildings themselves and in the streets themselves. And I was very conscious of that, when I saw it. And even when I was staying in Yau Ma Tei, it was quite apparent to me that there was obviously these huge buildings, these skyscrapers, the Hong Kong we're familiar with, but also the older Hong Kong that now seem to have been cut off. And as a concept, could the airport itself, the old airport, serve as a junction, as a way to negotiate those two worlds, and this idea that perhaps we could land in this airport? What if I had a ticket to this place? What if the runways were able to be used just one more time to land back into that old city? And something about that kind of the magical aspect of that really interested me. And with this image, even seeing how you can just sort of see the slight trail of an airplane sort of in the middle of the image by the crane, sort of it's very small details. It's not overwhelming. It's not a major thing, but just hinting at this idea that perhaps we could land here. Perhaps we could come back to this location. And very much that plays in with a concept I'm very interested in, which is saudade, the idea of a place that you long for, but which you cannot return. And so I think as an image that's coming out, and that's something that took a number of years for me to extract that from this image. I took this at the time trying to capture what I saw, the light and the shadow, but it was only upon later treatment and exploration of the concept that I was able to really find that within the image. And so in terms of the treatment itself, what I was trying to achieve was this very blue, kind of cold fluorescent color tone, very much looking at the opening sequence of Chungking Express and the cloud and time-lapse work done there. So the cinematography of that was a big influence for me. That was Christopher Doyle, and looking at the kind of the movement of the clouds and that kind of sense of motion, but also the stillness of the city itself. And then we see that the ocean is reflecting the sky. The ocean is brighter than the trees and this mid ground. So there's this almost kind of the darkest part of the image is where the old airport sits, which is where kind of theoretically, conceptually, that's the place, that's the site where I would like to, in my dreams, re-engage with the city. Can I land there again? What would it be like to, and again, this was before my time even, but what would it be like to land there just one more time, swooping in between the buildings, like those old images we've all seen of Hong Kong? And so there's ideas like that which I was playing with, ideas of construction. This site was under quite a lot of construction even at this stage, though interestingly it was not built up as much as it is today. I believe it's a stadium that they're actually putting into this location, and perhaps I think there's a ferry terminal happening as well. But at the stage that it was in when I took this photograph, besides the building in the middle of the image, there wasn't much else around. It was all earthworks, kind of extracting the layers of sediment and earth of the city, and kind of extracting that. And so it was quite raw. And I do have other images from this location which I shot, which kind of tell that story a little bit more. But in terms of this particular composition, very much just trying to contrast that darkness and lightness. Bringing out the dark blues, the blues and the greens, that kind of aqua film stock treatment, without being too overt with that, trying to maintain a little bit of a naturalist, natural treatment to the image, and then I think overall the establishing shot. Thinking of this in terms of cinematography, if this was a film, what is the establishing shot? Can we set the stage for this story of returning, of landing, of coming back home to this place which we had left for 25 years, and what that looks like? So that's sort of like my thoughts behind this image, and how I explored the concept. It wasn't, at the time I took the photograph, I wasn't looking for that connection with Kai Tak and the city. That was something I explored after. But my process is to take these images, to compose them, and to just let myself go, and with that to explore it as I see fit. And then from that, I'm able to stitch the narrative together as the story affirms itself, which is a process that has worked well for me. And I rely on that kind of intuition of trying to capture the story of the place, to just let it speak to me in the moment, and then at a later date I can come through and in the editing phase really make it what it needs to be, to tell the story.